All right, so today we're diving into something pretty cool. We're building a new toolkit for your brain. And the tools, well, they're coming from a place you probably wouldn't expect. Economics. Yeah, I know, but stick with me because you're about to see your own mind in a totally new light. So let's just jump right in with a massive question. Can economics actually explain your emotions? I mean, on the surface, that sounds a little crazy, right? Economics is all about money, markets, supply and demand, and emotions are, well, they're messy, they're human. But what if? What if the basic rules that govern economies also govern what's going on inside our heads? Okay, so here's the core idea for today. We're going to see if we can use economic models as this powerful new lens to understand ourselves. And look, this isn't about trying to put a dollar value on happiness or anything like that. No way. It's about taking a framework that's been tested for centuries and using it to bring a little bit of order to our sometimes, chaotic inner lives.
I mean, think about it for a second. Every single day, you're basically a manager. You might not have a corner office, but you're managing these incredibly precious, super limited resources. What are they? Your attention, your energy, and your motivation. And let's be real, there is never enough of that stuff to go around, is there?
So the question is, what if we could take the exact same principles that economists use to run entire countries and use them to manage our personal resources better? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
All right, let's grab our first tool from the economics toolkit. It's called returns to scale. And honestly, this is a game changer. It's all about figuring out when your hard work pays off big time, and maybe more importantly, when it just doesn't.
So in the world of economics, returns to scale is a pretty straightforward concept. It just asks, if you scale up your ingredients, your inputs, what happens to your final product, your output? If you double all the ingredients for a cake, do you actually get a cake that's twice as big? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Okay, so let's translate that directly to our own minds. In an economy, the inputs are things like labor, money, materials. But for you, the inputs are your effort and your attention. And the output, it's not a car or a smartphone. The output is your performance, how much you learn, or even just your overall well-being.
And this whole thing really breaks down into three flavors. First, you've got increasing returns. This is that awesome phase when you're learning something new, like playing the guitar. A little bit of effort gets you these huge, satisfying gains. Then there's constant returns. This is your day-to-day stuff, right? Routine tasks where an hour of work gets you an hour's worth of results. Predictable. But then there's the one we all need to watch out for, decreasing returns. This is when you're cramming for an exam, you're exhausted, and putting in more effort actually makes your performance worse. That, my friends, is the economic definition of burnout. So think about it for a second. Where are you hitting that wall of diminishing returns in your own life? Is it at your job, in the gym, maybe even, and this is a tough one, in some of your relationships? Just being able to spot it, that's the first, most crucial step to actually doing something about it. Okay, ready for tool number 2? This one is called the elasticity of you. And I love this one because it gives us a whole new way to think about something we all want more of, resilience. So, back in economics class, elasticity is just a fancy word for sensitivity. It measures how much one thing changes when another thing changes. The classic example is, if the price of your favorite ice cream goes up, how much less of it do people buy? It's all about that cause and effect. Now, let's bring that into our heads. It's the exact same idea, but we swap out the variables. Instead of price and demand, we're talking about stressors and your emotional well-being. So when something stressful happens, the input, how much does your mood or your happiness, the output, change? That reaction, that level of sensitivity, that's your emotional elasticity. And what's so cool about this idea is how you can apply it to almost anything. We can use it for resilience, like we said. How much does stress impact you? But you can also use it for motivation. How much does a potential reward actually boost your effort? It even works for understanding social relationships. It's super flexible. So this is the big takeaway here, and it might sound a little backwards at first. If you have high resilience, it means you have low emotional elasticity when it comes to stress. A huge stressor can hit you, but your well-being just wobbles a little bit instead of crashing. You're not as sensitive to that negative input. In economic speak, you're emotionally inelastic. Okay, so far we've been using these ideas as really powerful analogies, right? But what if we level up? What if we don't just borrow the concepts, but we borrow the actual structure of economic models? And I'm not talking about doing a bunch of complicated math. I'm talking about using them as thought experiments, like blueprints to map out how our own psychology actually works.
I know this might sound a little wild, but could we really create a model for something as personal and complex as, say, introversion versus extroversion? Could an equation actually shed some light on why different people need different things to feel good? Well, let's give it a shot.
Okay, before I throw an equation up on the screen and you click away, let's just talk about the ingredients. Remember, the goal here is not to solve for X. The goal is to tell a story with these symbols. So let's imagine our total well-being, we'll call it U for utility, is made up of two things, our energy level and our social satisfaction. And of course, both of those are going to be affected by how much time we spend alone versus how much time we spend with people.
So with those ingredients, a model for an introvert's well-being could look something like this. And again, please don't get hung up on the weird symbols. The only thing you need to see in this equation is a concept we already know, diminishing returns. That's all this model is saying. It's telling a story that for an introvert, yeah, time alone is great, but only up to a point. And social time is also valuable, but again, only up to a point. Too much of either, and the benefit starts to drop off. The model shows that the goal isn't just solitude. It's about finding that perfect balance.
Okay, so that's personality. But what about our actual actions? Can we take this even further and try to model something like altruism, that very human decision to help someone else, even at a cost to ourselves?
Turns out, yes, we can. And a model for altruism isn't trying to put a number on how good you are. That's not the point. It's just trying to map out the thought process. It would have to weigh things like your level of empathy, the personal cost to you, the potential benefit to the other person, and the whole social context of the situation.
And this model right here tells that exact story. See that E for empathy sitting out front? That's the key. It's a multiplier. It basically scales up the entire rest of the equation. So the more empathy you feel, the more weight you give to the benefit versus cost calculation. And all of that is shaped by social stuff, like your relationship to the person or your own moral code. It's not cold math. It's a logical map for a deeply emotional human choice.
So, where does all of this leave us? Well, it leaves us with this incredible new toolkit for thinking. But let's ask the most important question. Why does any of this matter? Why should we even bother looking at our minds through this economic lens?
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Here's your new toolkit. Takeaway number 1. Economic concepts are amazing analogies for our behavior. Returns to scale helps you finally put a name to that feeling of burnout. Elasticity gives you a totally new way to think about your own resilience. And maybe the biggest point of all, this isn't about reducing people to a bunch of numbers. It's about using these structured ideas to find a little bit of clarity in the beautiful mess that is being human.
And that brings us to the final question. And this one's for you to take with you. Now that you have these new tools, this new way of seeing things, what's one part of your own life, a tricky decision, a habit you're trying to build, a relationship, that you could understand just a little bit better by thinking about it like this? What part of your world are you going to model next?